Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Art of SBA Lending. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, my friend David.hulit. David is an SBA BDO at Ready Capital, and last year was his first year in the role. And prior to that, he was a BDA, which, if you're not familiar with, is like a sales assistant. In fact, David was my BDA before I left there. And in his first year as a BDO, he was the number one producer on the BDO team. Now, obviously, I wanted to have him on the podcast to congratulate him and also to learn a little bit more about what's he doing that's making him so successful. Before we get into today's episode, I have a very special announcement. The Art of SBA Lending will be hosting the first ever BDO Awards. This will be a live event held virtually, honoring the industry's most talented business development professionals. There are 6 categories: most consistent, rookie of the year, most improved, sales team of the year, sales manager of the year, and the coveted top producing BDO of the year. The winner of each category will win the GOATY, which is this thing right here, and the top producer will be flown in for the next BDO retreat. So March 2nd, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, mark your calendars. The link to register will be posted online very shortly. But in the meantime, if you're a BDO, go ahead and nominate yourself. There's 4 categories that you'll be considered for. You can also nominate your sales manager, and there's even a category for your entire sales team as a whole. So if you think your BDO team is the best, tell us why, and our committee will select one based on a variety of factors. This will be the most prestigious late afternoon event of the year for the SBA business development community. I will include the link to nominate in the show notes below. And without further ado, let's get on with the show. So this is the only episode I'm doing at the BDO retreat, by the way. So
I'm honored.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we're in Fort Lauderdale. So I want to talk actually a little bit about kind of the retreat and what we've been doing, because we sat in this morning. We had Dustin come in, talk about kind of disruption in the industry and stuff like that. And then Chelsea came and talked about the personal branding. Like, it's just a lot. And then we just talk, amongst each other, best practices with some of the BDOs. I was like, just curious, what's like standing out so far? What's the big takeaway?
It's all been great. But the biggest takeaway, I think, is just the uniqueness of each BDO's approach has been kind of shocking to me, and the amount of opportunity. But getting everybody together in the environment that has been fostered for people to share so openly. We are in an industry that is, could be perceived as very competitive. Sometimes it feels very competitive, but everybody's so openly sharing what could be their trade secrets. Someone might view it that way, but it is a camaraderie and a passion for what we do that is, it energizing.
Yeah, I remember when I first started doing LinkedIn stuff, like I would go to the Flagel conference and I did a panel about LinkedIn, and it was so basic. It was like, you can use LinkedIn to search the term broker, and then a list of brokers pop up, and then you can directly message them. And anyway, like everyone was like, "Oh, wow. Can you show me again how to do that?" I was like, "Lady, that's just how to log in. Like, this is simple." But then I just check, because LinkedIn, you can see what everyone's doing, right?
Yeah.
If you do something, if you post on LinkedIn, I can see it. And I just couldn't help but notice, like, maybe 1 out of like the 29 people in the audience actually did what I told everyone was making me all of my success.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't mind giving it away, and I'm glad we created this environment where everyone could just, give it away.
Yeah.
Half the people are going to be like, you know what, that doesn't work for me. Maybe this does, but it's not at my loss.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, like what'd you say? Like you didn't like really run into any of the folks in here when on your deals.
Not a single person in this room I think you said the total of all 19 was 500 million last year.
You're right.
And
which is insane.
It's insane. I mean, that's like how many percent of the entire industry?
That's so I don't know. Was last year 25 billion?
Sounds right.
So then, yeah, if this room did 500 million, that's like 2% of the overall SBA industry in this room.
It's incredible. I mean, nationwide, big banks, non-bank lenders, and that's 2% right here. And
Yeah.
I haven't competed with a single person in this room on a deal.
Do you get competitive? What about internally at ReadyCap? Like, is it, do you guys, are you like that there where you're like, it's more cutthroat, or do you
No.
get to like share best practices?
Very rare that I run into a referral partner that another BDO at ReadyCap is working with. It's happened sometimes. Part of my LinkedIn strategy that I do is I have kind of this script that I like when I connect with somebody. And then when I connect with them, I always like to ask something to the effect of, are you closing any loans with any of the team here at Ready Capital? I like yes or no questions. People are really quick to respond with those, I find. And if they're working with somebody, I say, great, they're an amazing BDO, like, you're in good hands, and
Right.
leave it. There's so much opportunity out there. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person, and there's no need. It's just like I'm busy enough. I don't need to steal something from somebody else, and I feel like people aren't doing that to me. They might, but I've even for lack of a better word, mentored other BDOs at Ready Capital on how to use LinkedIn. I remember there was this BDO that was having struggles getting traction. I spent an hour with her showing her how to do the searches. I streamed my screen. I showed her how to do the searches. As I was doing it and connecting with people, one of the people I connected with cold called me back while she was on the Zoom call and cold called my cell phone. I put her on mute. I took the call, and she got to hear how I did the first interaction, and it couldn't have worked out better. It usually doesn't work out that well.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And she was fired up. I mean, she was fired up, and I remember, and it made me feel fired up because I felt like, she felt like she had this new lease on, going out there and getting deals. And, I don't know if she did it or not. And I think that it takes time and consistency. And like you said, not everybody's going to do it. They might do it, but they might not have the consistency with it. So I have no problem sharing what I do.
So you would say LinkedIn is your primary way of developing business?
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it is. Without LinkedIn, I would have a fraction of what I do. I think I did one deal locally last year, and I'm very grateful for that. And I want to do more deals locally. But my state I'm from Maine. I live in Portland, Maine. We are a very well-banked state. We have fantastic community banks, fantastic credit unions. I live in a town called Falmouth, and on Route 1 there is it's like a mile stretch that has 14 different banks. So if you get turned down one by one bank, you're just going to the next, and they'll eventually do it conventionally, which is great for the consumer, difficult for the SBA BDO.
Right. So we obviously met because we overlapped at Ready Capital, and you were a BDA at the time, which is like a sales assistant.
Yeah.
But let me just start there. How did you land into that role?
I said it earlier today. I think it's kind of a funny thing. I mean, to be honest, it's like I feel like I was a little bit of a Nepo baby for the industry. My mother was the acting administrator of the SBA under the Obama administration for 6 months. Before that, she was the head of capital access and the regional administrator, but she's a commercial lender by trade. And when she left the SBA, she headed up Northeast Bank and created an SBA division there. Jonathan Smith was the director of the National SBA division for Northeast Bank. And I was actually applying to local banks. This was in, I think, 2018.
Okay.
And I was having no luck getting a good job at a bank. It was a different hiring market. I finally had a bank that was willing to hire me as a teller. And Jonathan reached out to my mom, and he said, she just said, "Hey, Jonathan, are you looking for anybody?" And he's like, "Actually, I need a BDA." And so he was down in New Hampshire in Portsmouth. It's about 45 minutes where I live. Drove down and met with them. We hit it off, and he took a chance on me. And it's changed my life. I owe an immense amount of gratitude to Jonathan for giving me a shot.
Okay, so you started as a BDA at another institution.
Yeah.
And then made your way to Ready Capital.
So I started at Harvest Small Business Finance, another nationwide non-bank SBA lender. And I also owe them a tremendous amount of gratitude for letting me, get in there and learn the business there. And also the sales culture and sales practices that they instilled in me there. They are a true sales culture at Harvest. And there was an expectation of BDAs to produce there at the time. So I was making cold calls probably the second week I started.
That's insane. Most shops do not expect BDAs to produce.
And I think there was an expectation to do 30 million over 3 years. So it was about 10 million a year. Was
like a BDO.
I know it was.
But that can get you into a BDO position.
That was the goal. So the thing I really loved about Harvest is they put out a map. Is the BDAs were basically a training program to become a BDO.
Right.
So the goal was that you become a BDO, but you do it through being a BDA. So there was a little bit less pressure on the sales origination goals. I'm sure they wouldn't have fired me if I didn't hit 10 million, but the goal was high. And I think that was something that was very important for me because I strove for that greatness. It may have been out of reach, but if the goal was 1 million, maybe I would have only done 300,000.
Right.
But they put it high. And it took me, I got 2 deals that first year, $1 million. First year in the industry, didn't know what I was talking about, but I learned, trial by fire.
Well, I like what you said about like being thankful to folks that helped you get here, because that's what everyone who is successful had other people help them and teach them. And I look over someone's shoulder and they teach me how to read a tax return. Like somebody's got to teach you that stuff. And in my head, I have a list of folks I'm super thankful for that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these people. And, sometimes when I do like speeches and stuff, I bring their name up and explain to people like these types of things. But that's like a good attitude to have, I feel like, because it's like, I'm thankful. Now I'm paying it forward, just like I'm doing on this podcast and you're doing with some of the other BDOs at Ready Capital.
And I was able to essentially hire a BDA and brought them into the industry as well, thanks to Ready Capital.
What was that?
February, almost a year now, I was able to hire Alexis, and she came from the branches at a local bank, a regional bank locally, and gave her the opportunity to be a BDA. And it's, I'm just so grateful.
So you're paying it forward.
Exactly.
There you go. So, but now, all right. So you got him through basically BDA. So kind of up in like a BDO in training almost type of role, learning documentation, stuff like that.
Yep.
We ended up at Ready Capital together, where I was a BDO and you were my BDA, which I was coming off of my BDA becoming a BDO, and I lost. And I was like not in a good spot. I was like, oh, I lost my, she was like, pretty much, I said, she was like why I was successful, I thought in my head. And she was in a large part of it. Shout out Cora.
Yeah.
But then David came into my life and changed everything. And then, you were awesome to work with, like amazing attitude, but also smart. You absorbed everything like a sponge. And then you were BDA there for a couple of years and you started producing, right? At some point when you were there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, because of my time at Harvest, I had a kind of book of business that I had kind of started to cultivate. After I left Harvest, I went to, and I do want to just say one thing about the time at Harvest. I modeled my kind of business development, honestly, off of you. Like seeing what you were doing on LinkedIn. Like I saw that you were using this platform to get business, and it inspired me. And between Jonathan instilling me cold calling, he was like, you make 20 cold calls a day, like minimum. And he was like, and you call block and you write it down and you hit that. And then matching that up with your LinkedIn, and like I tried doing videos back then, and it just like, it opened a lot of doors of possibility for me. So then that groundwork for that 1 year I did at Harvest. After I left Harvest, I went to Santander Bank and I worked as an SBA, kind of like a processor. Kind of like, it was like a hybrid kind of underwriter. I was doing credit memos, but mostly our smaller express deals. I realized how good I had it at Harvest, how much I liked the sales side of it. I thought maybe I didn't like the sales side because I wasn't having as much immediate success as I wanted. But I had to get that snowball rolling, I realized. And even while I was at Santander, I was getting calls from brokers I had connected with. So I remember I would send over deals to you. I'd send over deals to other BDOs. I'd say, you got to talk to Ray, you got to talk to whoever, because I couldn't do any originations at Santander. And then when I got to Ready Cap, I had some of that snowball rolling. I was working with you. I remember we had a couple deals that we worked on together that I brought in. They didn't land, but we had it started. Dana was working at ReadyCap at the time, and I'd worked with him at Harvest, so we kind of kept that going. But after you left, I got paired up with Mark Gilson, and that's really where it kind of took off. Mark Gilson is like a superstar BDO, and being able to work with him and absorb his best practices, his approach, his like psychology towards dealing with, the stress of the deals, really, I feel like helped take me to the next level. And that snowball just really started rolling, where I was doing so much loans last year that I was basically just BDAing and BDOing my own deals, but through Mark. It's kind of a weird hybrid.
Cora and you both were BDAs there that turned into BDOs. But I feel like Ready Capital's model isn't always to do the BDA into BDO. I feel like
definitely not.
Has there been anyone else?
No, it's definitely not the intention of the BDA at Ready Capital. I kind of created that path in a way for myself. Like I know Cora had done it too, but I like forced it. I was like, I'm now too big to fail as a BDA. Like I was more valuable as a BDO because I closed, I think 11.7 as a BDA while also being the second highest producing BDA in the company.
Well, that's interesting. So you did the job that you want before actually getting the title.
Yes, exactly.
That's actually a really valuable lesson, because I know I'm not going to call anyone out, but I know somebody that wanted the title in the past, but I was like, my advice was always like, just go produce.
Yeah.
Go bring in deals, get them to me, let's get them closed. And then so that's what you did. And you made it like undeniable that you were going to be a BDO.
Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, that's the best advice, is if somebody wants it, like just start doing it. Like I made it so abundantly clear that I could do the job through the volume that I produced, that they were eager to have me be a BDO at that point. I didn't ask to become a BDO and then figure it out. I was doing both, and I made sure to do my job as a BDA first and foremost. So right. I did not, and that I think is important. So I think sometimes I've seen BDAs want to do what I did at Ready Capital, and maybe they focus too hard on being a BDO. I made sure to be a very well-respected BDA first, but also do the BDO stuff. And that required a pretty immense sacrifice in my free time.
So how did you learn credit?
I learned credit through Jonathan Smith primarily.
Okay.
He taught me how to read tax returns. He taught me how to do cash flow analysis. And then I also learned credit through osmosis. So being a BDA, I was putting together the files and whatnot, but I was also reading the BDO's pre-screens and seeing how they approached the deals. And so I think that was a major, advantage that I had as from that position. I could learn from the best. I got to read your credit memos or your pre-screens.
Which are average.
I mean, above average, to be
honest. I've
never
been known for the best, I'm like average. It's like just enough to get there.
There is a wide spectrum. From being a BDA, I've seen literally...
I'm not the worst, but I'm not the best.
I would say you're on the upper tier for sure.
I think you're very generous.
Definitely on the upper tier. And then, so that was super helpful.
But you didn't do like a formal credit training.
No.
You're like me. You learned it on the streets, I like to say.
I learned it on the streets. No formal credit training.
You can't make any excuses. I have to go back to what you said about if you're a BDO right now and you want to increase your production, I would say the sweet spot for who this is relevant to would be if you're anything under a, let's say $30-ish million producer, 35 million. Because if you're a 35 plus $million producer, I don't think cold calling 20 calls a day is that smart. I would be more strategic with who I approached at that point. But if I'm anything below that and I want to get to the next level, the number one way to do it is block out the time, make 20 calls a day to the right audience with the right message.
And that's key too.
That is like, how is everyone not doing that? and actually being disciplined too. How did you do it? Like what kept you like motivated to keep doing that and do it in a consistent way? And also, how do you figure out what your message is?
I think that my message got refined over time. In the beginning, I was scared, but the only way to learn cold calling and doing it is to do it a lot. By the 1,000th call, you start to get a swagger with it. And that swagger, I think, is key for hitting those calls and turning them into, referrals. Like, I've called people and had them send me a deal right after we got off the phone. I've had that a lot of times.
Same.
It's amazing. So when I talk to BDOs and they're not getting business, I pick up the phone. But I've learned how, like you had said in the beginning, like targeted searches on LinkedIn. Now, if any BDO needs more volume, that's the biggest secret. And if you don't do it, that's on you. But that's what I've done. So I make sure that I'm calling the highest value. So if I'm making those 20 calls, I'm not calling the pizza shop down the street who might need a loan, might not need a loan, might be a conventional borrower, might not be a conventional borrower. I'm calling the industry-specific referral partners that I know have deals.
Right.
And so my 20 calls are valuable calls. And those guys also can smell BS. So in the first 1,000 calls, they smelled my BS. I remember I called this guy and he just lit me up. He's like, this is when I was at Harvest. He's like, how many deals have you closed? How long have you been working in the industry? Why the F would I do a deal with you? And he just laid into me. I was so embarrassed. But what I learned to do is when that happens, to pick up the phone and make another call. I can't have that be the last call of the day. If I end on that note, it's all downhill from there. So I had to just work through that. And it's interesting, I called that guy about a year ago while I was at ReadyCap and I'd started having some success. And he answered the phone. He's like, David, it's so good to hear from you. You're doing great. You're crushing it, man. Tell me. And it was insane how much different the conversation was. And it comes to this kind of chicken before the egg sort of situation, which is people like to work with successful people. It's just the truth. So it is very tough in the beginning to become a successful person because, so that's why the volume of calls is important, because there are people out there who do want to give a shot to somebody new. They are out there. Or I found so many times I called somebody and they're like, you just called me at the right time. The BDO I work with turned down this deal. Take a shot at it. And you'll never get that opportunity if you don't pick up the phone.
I get that all the time. I'll be randomly reaching out to a broker, and how many times have they said this to you? Oh, your timing couldn't have been better.
Seriously?
Well, it's because I'm always calling.
Exactly.
And 1 out of every 10 of them, it's like, oh, it's perfect timing.
Which is pretty good odds. And that's about what it feels like.
I mean, we're giving away all the secrets here, and the secret is the job's not that hard.
Honestly,
to get the deals is not that hard. That's actually the easy part. How do you get it? How do you like the rest of the job? Like getting the deals through?
That was the hardest part for me to figure out. And that was where I'll be honest, I was in tears on some of the first deals I got through the system at Ready Capital because I was so stressed. I did not know how to work through closing. I did not know how to work through challenges in underwriting, and I was just a ball of stress. It was the fear of the unknown because I was taking it to the next level, and I knew I had like 3 deals lined up that would have gotten me to like 4 million while I was a BDA, and I was like, this is going to be that proof of concept for me. Right. I do this, and they're gonna pay attention to me. But I was so nervous those deals were gonna blow up. Oh my God, it was brutal. So I was micromanaging the closers. The closers were wicked mad at me. I was embarrassing myself left and right, getting in the middle of it. And I had to do that from like trial and error, and having to have the experience, reflect on what went wrong, why it went wrong, and what I could do better next time. And it is so important and critical to build a good relationship with your credit partners and your closing team. It is critical because, it is a team sport. As much as I can, as much as, as a BDO, I'm like, I'm 21 million, me. It's like, it's the team that did it. And I've got to, it's important to respect them and respect what they're going through. But also at the same time, sometimes things do need to be moved along, and knowing a way to respectfully do that.
So you've refined your approach with how you deal with like deals and closing.
Deals and closing and deals and underwriting. I feel like I went through a stage where I was doing skimpy credit pre-screens, and I got beat up by credit. And now I got some feedback recently, not to pat myself on the back, but I was told that the underwriters like receiving my deals now.
That's the best compliment you can get in a shop, I feel like.
I felt like I had arrived. I got that at my year-end review this year, and it was such a sea change from last year. It's about selling externally, but also selling internally. And that equally. It's got to be, it's almost more important. I mean, like I like to say sometimes it's like, I've worked with BDOs that are very credit minded. They're very good at structuring deals, but they are bad at finding deals. And I've also worked with BDOs who are amazing at finding deals, but they are terrible at working with the back office.
Right.
And it has to be a healthy balance of both.
So this past year was your first full year as a BDO. You started the year as a BDO. You ended the year as a BDO. How did you do?
I actually started as a BDO in February too.
Oh, okay. Not even a full year then.
So I had some deals in the pipeline from when I was a BDA. So I'll throw that out there. So there was that push.
So so 11-ish months.
I was able to update LinkedIn and go full steam, no more BDAing for anyone else in February.
And you closed 21 million or change.
21.752.
But who's counting? And you work under my old buddy Michael Johnston.
Yeah.
And that BDO channel, BDO team, and that basically put you number one in that group for production by a hair.
By a very small hair.
And that's your first full year as BDO. So that's amazing, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you like, what are you doing to do this? But we already gave it all away. And if you missed it, it's like you got some problems because it's not that hard. It's go on LinkedIn, be consistent, make calls, pick up your phone.
Yeah.
And then treat everyone with respect.
And you just said something that I want to touch on again, which is pick up your phone. That is like, I've been asked, what are you doing differently, David? When I get a call from a broker or a borrower or a referral partner, I'm on the phone, say I'm on the phone with you. I am still talking with you, still paying attention to our conversation, but I say I have pre-canned messages, like on the phone with a client, I'll call you back promptly, or I'm in a meeting, I'll call you back as soon as possible. And I send that because everybody's using a cell phone nowadays, so they get text messages. I want them to be acknowledged and anticipating my call back. I never let it ring to voicemail because I value seconds in this industry. If they're on the phone letting it ring for 10 seconds and I could have nipped it in the butt in 1 second, I just saved them 9 seconds. I know it seems fractional, but I look at it like when you send a message to somebody and they leave it on read and you're just like, can you please just respond to me? I know you saw it, and it eats at people. And I feel like we have a very fast-paced culture now with social media, TikTok, Facebook. We want instant gratification, and I deliver that.
Yeah.
And so I will respond to people when I'm in bed at 9:30 p.m. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do that because I'm willing to do what others aren't today so that I can, get ahead.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's going to go to who wants it the most. And if you're starting out and you're hungry and you want to build it, it's good to know what it takes. Like, people should know what it takes, because some people in their head, they say, I want to do 20 million, 25 million. And then they hear what it takes. And it's, sometimes it's just not, what? Never mind. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to work, a little bit more than the typical banker works.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what it takes. And then when you build it and you get bigger and your orbit gets bigger, like what I've done in recent years is then you can change and you can do things a little bit differently, but you got to take it one step at a time. I mean, there's levels to this.
Exactly. And that's what's powerful about the BDO retreat for me, is because you guys are at that next level, and I need to learn what's next. Because I agree, it's not sustainable for me at the 20 million level to make 20 cold calls a day. I need to refine. I need to niche down, and I need to, change the process now that the snowball's been built.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be an average loan amount type of thing. It could be now going after more real estate versus this type of deal, or less, whatever, deal types, referral source types, things like that.
Yeah.
Do you look back at the year and look and kind of take inventory of where the deals came from?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
And sometimes I get, a little anxiety doing that. I looked back at this year, and a lot of it came from overweighted percentage came from one referral partner, which I absolutely love him. He's great. But I also know he works with a lot of other BDOs. It's not a mutually exclusive thing, and I don't expect it to be. I respect that, and I realized I need to diversify. Diversification is critical, for me at least. I want to have, and I hear different approaches. Some people have 5 to 6 core referral sources, and that's it, which is pretty good diversification. If one falls out, you'll still make it. I'm still searching for that 5 to 6. So I probably work with 10 to 20 referral partners. And it's starting to become more shored up on which ones are those consistent go-tos. And I probably do some things that you might think's crazy. But I like to invest in new brokers, because I worked with this guy this year, and it was his first SBA loan ever. He just started he put SBA loan broker in his LinkedIn profile. I searched him, caught him, called him as the first person ever. And I did a 100% LTV rent replacement for a business that had been around for 14 months. And
nice.
Blew him away. But I educated him on everything throughout the process. Probably invested a lot more time than most people would have wanted to. Maybe than I have time to do today. But I'm so grateful I did it, because he was just so pleasant to work with, so appreciative. I taught him that, what I knew as best as I could, and taught him what to go look for and help make him some money. And, I know I'm his first call because I invested in him.
And probably for life, honestly. I mean, it doesn't always work out like that.
Sure.
It might take dealing with 10 of these brokers to find that one, but that one's going to be a broker for life.
Exactly.
We were talking a little bit earlier about 912 stuff, and it got me thinking, because I've been doing this 11 years, and sometimes you run these reports, and I know they're getting rid of the whole 912 process, and honestly, I was at Nagel, and they were basically talking one of the big initiatives of the administration is to kind of have the mentality that if somebody has done a crime, paid the time, and goes back into society, they should be, treated like everyone else. And I don't know, I feel like I've looked at background checks where it's let's say 5 drug charges 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're they see that and they're well, we don't want to do that deal. It's, this, you want to lend to a drug addict? I was yeah, but how, it's weird, because I feel like a lot of banks do, financial fraud's one thing. That's always a non-starter. And SBA will clear pretty much anything, but the bank itself making the decisions, I always feel like they are quick to judge folks who have a past. And sometimes it's 30 years. Sometimes it's 10, 8, whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know, how should we be thinking about that? Because I always feel like I'm defending. Sometimes I'll go to bat for these people. I know you're the same way.
Absolutely.
Because I'm they have a turnaround story, and I'm fine with that. I'm why are you not? Why does someone 10 years ago who's completely evolved since then, why are we still holding that against them?
100%. It is something I'm super passionate about. I wrote multiple letters to my local my U.S. senator in Maine. Both U.S. senators in Maine.
They have 2 there?
We do.
We gave Maine 2 senators?
We're pretty lucky. And,
they only need 1, I feel like.
I kind of agree with that.
What's the population up there? 100,000?
Sometimes it feels like it. It's like 1 degree of separation.
And you did a deal there.
Got that one deal. I got one coming up. Stay tuned. It's going to be a good one too. I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be my second deal in Maine.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. And so it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I mean, I have friends, family who've had challenges that they've overcome. And it is, even if it wasn't just my friends and family and personal connections and my own life experience, I'm a wholehearted believer that people can change. I think that is an important fundamental concept for me, at least in life. And I think it's so silly to have somebody who's done something, wrong in their life, but now is, 10 years later, even 5 years later, I don't know, who am I to say what's the right amount of time? I could get into some logic with that in a little bit later, but they now want to create a business and create jobs and pay taxes and reintegrate into society. Why should we stop them? Do we want them to go back out on the street and stay a drug dealer? It seems ridiculous to me that we wouldn't want them to buy into the system and to integrate. And reentry, re-advocacy is something I am very passionate about. And I have the true pleasure and honor to be working with a borrower right now. We're going to be, fingers crossed, closing on an acquisition of a restaurant with real estate. And he has been very, his whole life after overcoming his own background issues in the 90s, the early 90s. He has been a pillar of his community, and he's done immense reentry advocacy work and has worked with Senator Cory Booker and was, from my understanding, instrumental in helping to move the needle with the 912 issue.
Really?
And the 912 issue, just for people who don't know, is the SBA requires anyone with a misdemeanor to provide court documents, case files, proof of satisfaction for charges, no matter how old.
Fingerprints.
And if it's a felony, it goes up to fingerprints. And the crazy thing about it is I've never seen one declined. I've seen embezzlement. I've seen murder. I've seen
murder.
Yeah, everything gets cleared. And it gets cleared by the SBA when it's a felony. So it's not even up to the lender. The SBA will always sign off on it unless it's a few certain things. But what happens is it's like a walk of shame. And I feel,
right.
I can hear the shame on the other side of the phone, and it breaks my heart. And I am so grateful that my perspective and life experience, I can ease their stress by letting them know it's going to be all right. My experience, I know the SBA is going to approve it, but we just got to document it. But it is just so sad that we do have to document it. I had this kid who got charged with underage drinking when he was 17. We still had to document that. His court had no email because it was out in the middle of nowhere in a rural area of a state, and they just didn't have email system. His mom had to drive 5 hours to the court to get a letter from the court that said that they no longer had the court documents for us to meet SOP. And the fact that they're changing it, I think, is a huge step in the right direction. But
it's just a step, though, because the lenders still have that stigma.
Yes.
And so the SBA already was approving everything. Now you just don't have to go through the process. But now it's like, I just feel like we have some work to do with the lenders, because I feel like they don't want to attach their name to this piece of paper that says some bad things that happened in the past because of reputation or regulators.
Sure.
or whatever. So I feel like it's just the way we were perceiving it.
Yes.
I feel like needs work, because you need to understand, like, people do crime and then they're punished.
Yes.
And then that punishment is supposed to make them understand what they did was wrong, and then they don't do it again. And then now you go back into society. And if you then reject them from society, they're more likely to go back to doing the bad stuff.
Exactly. And I will throw out there for all of the credit-minded skeptics, like, I understand that if I look at a background report and they get arrested for, let's say, DUI every 2 years, a pattern is definitely different. So habitual offenders in a pattern, I'm not going to argue with. A bank can definitely make a decision that is logical based off that. But somebody who made one mistake from 10 years ago or 5 mistakes 20 years ago, they have learned from it. And I agree. We need to, as an industry, banks, lenders, we need to have compassion and excitement for these people who are, like, now just like the American dream. they're bringing jobs, they're helping their communities. Like I think it's awesome. I love seeing it.
It's almost a strength, honestly, if you've turned it around and you've been to the bottom of like rock bottom, if you felt that. And again, this isn't all just like, hey, I want to start up a business. Like I'm looking at existing cash flowing businesses with people who have the experience. They just happen to have, maybe it's 5 drug charges from 18 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's 5, and maybe it's coke dealing, you know, but it's like, that's 18 years ago. You've now built this business. I'm talking about you've already built it. And I think it's actually a strength that they have that background versus
100%.
the guy who grew up in the right family and like just, you know, knew the right people and never face adversity.
It's such a good point.
You need grit to be in small business. David, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having. This is like it's like a dream come true. It's like a football player getting on ESPN or something. I feel like this is the ESPN of SBA lending.
It is the #1 podcast in the industry and the only podcast in the industry.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Cool, man. Thanks. All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.